The Gospel of John, from which this passage today comes, is different. That John the Evangelist is different from the other three evangelists, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And as a consequence, John calls this first sign, he's the only one that tells about Jesus attending this wedding in Cana. And the only one who tells this story about the water becoming wine. And he puts it as the first of what he calls signs. Matthew, Mark, or Luke might say miracle. It would be interesting if you're not normally a reader of Scripture, if you took tomorrow or a free day, if you're not invited to the inauguration, to read one of the evangelists, Matthew, Mark, or Luke, and the Gospel of John. You'll see that they have very different approaches. Matthew, Mark, and Luke sound similar, although there are big differences, of course, between some of them. But John has just such a different approach. It sounds different, uses different vocabulary, has a different vision. He talks about, Jesus, when he talks about my hour in John, is talking about the hour of his death and then resurrection. When he talks about glory, he's talking about the same thing, him being glorified by his life, his death, his resurrection. It's not the terms that Matthew, Mark, or Luke would use. So if you read both one of the three synoptics and John, you'd say, wow, what a difference, some differences. And this is one of them, as I said. Now, on a human level, it's a great story, is it not? You know, when those of you who've planned your own weddings, in church, know that there are a lot of options when it comes to planning the wedding. There are lots of different readings you can choose. There's lots of different prayers. There's lots of different symbols that you can incorporate right into your wedding ceremony. And people do. They choose different things, trying to. And it may be the church is encouraging this because it's a way of, so to speak, inviting Jesus to your wedding. Because, of course, so many other things surround marriage, that it's hard sometimes to keep the focus. And by being able to choose and tailor the ceremony itself, you're able somehow to invite the Lord to be present. And what a guest. You don't even have to set the table for him, right? When he comes. Here you find a very interesting story. Maybe it was even a family wedding because his mother was there, he was there, and disciples, we don't know. It doesn't say. Maybe it was. And maybe that's why we can postulate that Mary was, an aunt, a cousin. So she's concerned about them running out of wine. And so, and we know the story. These water jars are filled and then transformed. And it's a fabulous story just on that level. But John says it's the first of his signs. Remember, he doesn't use the word miracle. The first of the 7 signs that John has in his gospel. So, what is he looking at? It's great to have a fabulous wedding. Everybody wants it. Everyone having a good time. Well, there's a lot of... If a Jew were listening to this story, a practicing Jew in Jesus' day was hearing this story, they would see something even much deeper. Because the 6 water jars are not just water jars. They have a specific purpose. They're not for drinking. They're for purifying, ceremonial washing. In other words, in Judaism of that day, one could become impure or unable to worship from a lot of different reasons. Maybe sin, but most of the time from going to the market or visiting a pagan area or whatever. And they used these ceremonial washings. They weren't sanitary washings. They were sprinklings and pourings, to purify them so that they could then. It was a way of washing off, so to speak, the, quote, impurities that someone might have encountered by what happened or where they were, so that they could then enter into a wedding to worship and stuff. So it's those jars that Jesus says fill with water, so we fill them up. And those jars that are transformed into wine, they could never be used again for ceremonial washings, because those jars were kept separate for that. To put another liquid in it, to put milk in it, to put wine in it, to put any oil in it, was to forever make them impure. So what a Jew listening to this and practicing would say, what is he doing? He's taking these jars that were used and all of a sudden rendering them totally different. He's taken the water, it's become wine, not just for the party, but all of a sudden something new is happening here. And a person raised in Jesus' culture would immediately say, whoa, what's happening? Besides that it's wine. Something new, something's passing. And of course, John would be quite clear later on that Jesus is supplanting some of the superfluous aspects of Judaism in his day. But they weren't superfluous, and that's why to those who felt strongly, and that would lead, we know, to his hour, to his glory, to his death. So, and John wants us, he doesn't want us just, because none of us are Jewish practicing in his day. So what do we get out of it? He's going to take if you invite him, so to speak, into your life, he's going to take what's superfluous, what's useless, what's counterproductive, and he's going to transform it forever. He's going to make something richer. In other words, that's the disciples began to believe in him because they began to see his transformative power. Not just to go from water to wine, but a transformation that could change you and I. John wants us to know that you and I will be transformed if we invite Jesus to our wedding, to our life, into our life. That he can take the brokenness of life and he can begin to pull out. This is the invitation. This is the glory that we have. You see, so he's level and level and level. And I'm sure there are other things you could pull out of the scriptures too. But the invitation for us, I think, is, so to speak, the same invitation that people plan in their wedding, to kind of invite the Lord to be present by the readings and prayers that they choose. But the invitation to us, we're not getting married. The invitation to us is to invite him into our life. Not simply for this hour on Sunday, but if we go to breakfast after, or if we watch the game, or whatever today, that we invite him. Allow the power of Christ to transform you. To take the water of the rituals that you've held on to, so to speak, or the bad attitudes, and to begin to transform them. Begin to renew, to deepen, or even to wash away these invitations. So you can see that as you look deeper, the invitation, it's as immediate as today. You know, you can. This transformation is meant to bring us the fullness of life. I don't know if you focused on the second reading today, which was from Corinthians, but that reading talked about the multiplicity of spiritual gifts. And St. Paul was quite sure that every one of us has these kinds of gifts. And not everyone has everything. So the gifts that we have are meant to be put at the service of the Holy community. The gifts are meant to be transformed. So if we've gone down a dead end of using whatever gifts we have in useless ways or even bad ways, the Lord's inviting us to be recentered. And He has the power to do it. And He has the power to lift us up. So, invite the Lord to your wedding today. Invite Him to your lunch. Invite Him to your dinner. Invite Him to your family meeting. Invite Him to the inauguration tomorrow when we're up there with the Supreme Court justices. Invite Him in every aspect. Let Him transform you. Let Him transform me.